Serious, what is the downright scariest thing that has ever happened to you? Be it paranormal or otherwise? Edit. Oh damn. I've never posted to AskReddit before. Waking up to 650 oranges is the peeping best. I fell asleep on the couch at around 6 to 7 p.m. and woke up at 4 a.m. in the middle of my backyard when it was raining. Oh man. When I was little I was terrified of my bed. It was an antique and was literally over 100 years old. I would knock on it and hear knocks back from underneath. One night I woke up under my bed all the way against the wall. This was a queen-sized bed and stood like 3 feet off the ground, and I was a light sleeper. I don't know how I could have managed to fall off the bed then slide over to the wall in my sleep. The thing that terrifies me the most is it would have been more plausible if I could roll underneath the bed, but there wasn't enough space under it to do that. I would have had to fall and somehow wiggle or slide over if I wasn't just dragged to the wall. I was about 5 or 6 years old living in Dallas, and I was in the nurse's office when the tornado warning siren went off. The nurse ran out of the room towards the other side of the school, leaving me behind. The lights had gone off, and I didn't want to be alone, so I went to follow her, and ended up on this ramp that connected both sides of the school. To the right of me was the cafeteria, and on my left was a wall with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was so dark outside that I could barely see anything out the window. The sound of the siren combined with the intense wind scared me the most. By this point I was in tears and I just stood there for who knows how long, because I was so scared. Then the vice principal came running up the ramp, scooped me in her arms, and asked whose class I was in. I remember walking into the classroom and seeing my teacher with a flashlight in her hands, huddled with the other students in the middle of the classroom. 16 years later May is still my hero. What a speepty nurse. Peep the kids. I'm out. You joke, but I'm a teacher, and I've heard faculty say things along those lines. Things like, if there's a shooting, I'm not barring the door for the kids. I'm getting to safety. It's not worth losing my life over. It's kind of shocking, because I get so attached to the kids. And I know, if we were in danger I will be doing something stupid like run into a tornado to see if any babies are in danger. And I teach middle school, when kids really bloom into speedheads, before they develop a conscience, to go with their newfound independence. Edit. I should mention that I don't have a family, so I don't have to consider any long-term consequences of self-sacrifice. And it's not every faculty member. Overall, schools are staffed with people who have jumped through too many hoops and sacrificed too much of their personal lives for too little pay, so we can be there for the kids. One time I woke up and my eyes were super dry. Like, beyond description. I opened them and it was pitch black. Couldn't see a thing. But I knew there was light in the room, since my alarm went off, so it must have been 8 a.m. at least. I literally felt my eyelids to make sure they weren't closed. I shut them and rubbed/cried for like a minute to moisturize them, and I could see again. So yeah, waking up blind is not a fun thing to have happen. That reminds me of when I was maybe 4 or 5 and had pink eye in both eyes and woke up with my eyes stuck shut. It was just all that gunk that comes from the infection. And I was so peeping scared and screaming, and my mom finally helped me and told me it'd be okay. After that she was there every morning with a warm, wet washcloth to rub my eyes with so they would be able to open if it happened. I love my mom so much. That happened to me in my 20s. Every morning I'd make the blind trek to the sink to dissolve the cement holding my eyelids shut. It's a really weird experience to be physically unable to open your eyes. Flying from Denver to New York City. About 30 seconds after the plane leaves the ground the left engine explodes likely a bird, they said. I'm pretty calm, but start getting freaked out when I notice the stewardess are all crying. Completely freaked out when we are getting close to landing and there are fire trucks all up and down the runway. And the runway we are landing at is way the hell away from the terminal and everything else. Wow. So I don't wish this situation upon anyone. But if it ever does happen to anyone, you must get on the next flight. Some of my fellow passengers opted to take a train home. If I'd done that, I'm positive I would have never flown again. I swear I read somewhere that the number one reason why planes are grounded is because birds hit the windows or the engines and cause damage. Fell 75 feet off a cliff when I was in my 20s. I was pretty sure I was going to die, but I got lucky. Yikes. What injuries? Broke my ankle, dislocated my knee and some lacerations on my back from bouncing off a few boulders along the trip. When I was 16, I was at a local mall by myself. I noticed a large man kept going where I would go, and just gave me a bad gut feeling. After about 15 minutes of him following me around, I go into a Starbucks and sure enough he follows. This Starbucks was right next to the mall's public restroom, and I so stupidly decided to go into the women's room. Thinking he wouldn't follow, I go into a stall, lock the door, and pull my feet up so they can't be seen, since the stall's lot didn't continue to the floor. No more than 10 seconds later I hear the bathroom door open and someone walking in. The man stopped in front of my stall door and just stands there, facing it for what felt like minutes. He was so close to the door his boots were pretending into the stall. Then, without any words spoken from either of us, he left and I never saw him again. Scariest few minutes of my life, and I'm still so mad at myself for isolating myself in a bathroom. I worked in a coffee shop in high school. One night, right around closing, this woman comes up to the counter looking slightly frantic and tells us someone is following her. We told her to come into the back with us and use the phone to call the police. As the office door closed, in walked a disheveled looking guy. He just stood there looking around the store for a minute or so and, not seeing her, turned and left. Never be afraid to ask for help from other people. Something like that happened to me on my way to my mom's in Florida last Thanksgiving. I walked into a gas station in the mountains in West Virginia because I had to pee. When I came out of the bathroom, the attendant was freaking out, saying some big guy followed me in and started asking about me. The attendant just kept asking who the guy was that was with me. It was just me and my girlfriend. He told me the guy was like right on my heels when I walked in and to get to my car as soon as possible while he watched with the phone. I got to the car and my sir yelled at me to drive. I guess he came over to the car after he left the gas station and was pounding on the window asking about me and what we were up to. He was demanding to be let in and getting irritated before he sulked back to his truck around the corner. I was about to trade off with my so, since I had driven 500 miles. I was so freaked out I ended up going for like 4 more states. Opening my front door to see 12 armed police officers about to raid the house. What for? The IP address of the house had been linked to child pornography due to my uncle. A raid is actually really scary. I was at a house that got raided when I was 16 or 17. I stopped by to grab some weed around 11 PM, well-known drug house, and 20 minutes later we heard banging and police broke down the doors, swarmed in with guns telling everyone to get on their knees and hands behind their head. They had guns pointed at the back of our heads and yelled for everybody not to move. You're basically in their hands until their warrant expires. I watched them rip down the walls of the house and pretty much destroy everything looking for money and drugs. Jesus. What happened afterwards? Did they lock people up? Were you free to go? 2 of my friends were spending the night at my parents' house. We were all still in high school. My bedroom was a room away from the kitchen, connected by a pantry and hallway. I heard the back door handle jiggle, which meant a cat wanted to go outside. So I went to let it out and get a drink. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed there was no cat there, and the door to the basement was wide open, which we always left closed and locked. So I closed and locked the basement door, a tad unnerved, but it didn't matter. Next to the basement door was a staircase that went upstairs to the 2nd floor. This is relevant later. A couple hours later I hear the fridge door close. I noticed that because I didn't hear it open, but it was in a different room, so that's not too weird. What made it weird was that I didn't hear anyone walk down the stairs or by my bedroom from the front of the house. The back stairs to the 2nd floor are really loud and creaky, so I heard something. Unnerved, I took a knife and went into the kitchen. I see no one in there, but immediately noticed smoke coming up from under the basement door. I opened it up, and it was filled with smoke. Close to it. Got my parents up. Call the fire dept. Go get ready to sleep in my car for the night as it was about 4 AM at this point. A firefighter comes and tells us it's okay to go back into the house now. For some reason the furnace had caught fire inside and was filling the house with carbon monoxide. Had my friends and I went to sleep we'd all be dead. Still have no clue what jiggled the doorknob or closed the fridge, but it kept me alive. Carbon monoxide causes people to be delusional. There was actually a thread pretty recently about a guy who thought he was being stalked in his own apartment. But it turned out there was carbon monoxide in his apartment, and he was forgetting the note he'd been leaving for himself. I never knew it could do that. I'm glad the hallucinations helped me out at least. I was asleep in bed one night and my mom, who had recently taken interest in home security, had put a wooden dowel in my bedroom window and forgot to tell me about it. It was obviously a redneck version of a window lock, because we lived in an old house and didn't have locks on the windows for some reason. I found out later that there was an electrical fire in the hallway outside my bedroom, and I woke up to smoke slipping into my bedroom from beneath my door. Being a little kid, I was scared speechless and had no idea what was going on at the time, and so being smart, I thought to try and get out my window, but I couldn't get the dowel out. I spent what felt like 10 minutes trying to get my little fingers around it and slip it out of the window sill but couldn't. Finally, my mom got into my bedroom, grabbed me and wrapped a wet towel around me, and super mommed us out of the house, and me safely out of trouble. Best part? She went back in, got our fire extinguisher from under the kitchen sink, and put that fire out herself. Thankfully, it wasn't some huge, home-destroying catastrophe. We had a baby monitor that, besides sound, also monitored the baby's breathing and set off an alarm SIDS. The alarm would go off on the baby's side to jar them, and also the parent's remote. One night we forget to turn up the sound, and in the middle of the night I roll over and see the lights pegged. I freaking fly out of bed screaming to my wife. Darting into the nursery I suddenly find no peeping baby in the crib. I suddenly realize my wife must have brought the little guy to our bed and forgot to turn off the alarm. I wheel around and pass her coming in and say he's in our bed, and she screams bloody murder because this, she knows for a fact, is not the case. My whole world just stopped with absolute abject terror. She screams who took my baby. Somehow, through massive adrenaline rush and massive fright, I Sherlock Holmes it. House alarm is still armed. No windows or doors could have been opened. The nursery door was closed. He must still be in the room. Glance around and see the only place he possibly could be is behind/under the crib. I fall to my hands and knees and lo and behold, little dude is on his belly looking at me, smiling. Even thought mom is hysterical. I reach under and gently pull him out by his ankles, and mom meanwhile sees this and assumes he's not alive, because how the hell does a 1-year-old climb out of a high-sided crib when he can't even stand and manage a 4-foot fall unharmed? She scooped him up and cried for an hour rocking him. I didn't sleep that night. Little monster has had us guessing ever since. Damn you. I had nearly forgotten, or at least suppressed, but your story brought it back. My middle child, my oldest son, was maybe 3, and he and I were home alone. His older sister was at school and his mom was gone on some errand. I worked third shift and was always sleep deprived. I waited him out, and sure enough he started twirling his hair in the way he did when ready to nap. We got on the couch with him on my chest, and when he fell asleep so did I. I awoke a few hours later, and he wasn't on my chest. Normally he would have poked at my eyes and woke me up, but not this time. I listened but all was quiet. I got up to catch him at whatever mischief he was into, but he was nowhere. He wasn't in the house. It's important to point out that we live on a very rural farm. If he wasn't in the house, the potential was terrifying. Outside I went. The weather wasn't an issue. The pond and the wells and the horses were my immediate thought. I spent the next hour plus screaming, crying, searching for my son. Sheer uncontrollable terror that I don't wish to contemplate any further. Then the greatest thing to ever happen took place. My wife drove into the driveway. I ran to her distraught. In the backseat in his car seat was my namesake. The next little bit is a fog. I basically collapsed. Turns out she had come home and found us asleep and gently picked him up and left to finish her errands. She had hoped I could get the rest I needed. She didn't leave a note. When I was younger and visiting my parents, I took my Stumpy, never met a stranger lab mutt out to go potty around 5 AM. At the end of the super long driveway I ran into a guy just kind of hanging out in the pine trees. He asked for a cigarette, and when I said I didn't have one he wished me a good night. The whole time my happy little dog, she must have been about 10 months old, was straining towards him for attention. I get halfway up the driveway and she suddenly lunges behind me, practically ripping my shoulder out of the socket. Just going absolutely ape-speep. Something I have never and still haven't seen from her to this day 8 years later. When I spun around to get her under control, I see the guy is just beyond her, each booking it away. He was following me up the driveway. Later I remember my family remarking over the few days I was there that it smelled like cigarettes around the front porch and garage. This guy had probably been hanging around our house. I don't know what would have happened had my dog not flipped a speep. A photo of said Stumpy dog to lighten the post.